Hey everybody, it's Mike. All right, so today I want to talk to you about your anger and your rage and your resentment that you have towards your borderline ex. You should be angry. You should be enraged. You should be sad. You should have all of those negative feelings. Excuse me, I've been drinking my organic kombucha cola here. Before I go any further, I must give the uh, disclaimer that I am not a mental health professional of any kind. I am not a borderline. I am not an expert in borderline personality disorder, nor am I an expert in any kind of mental illness whatsoever. I'm just somebody who survived an extremely toxic relationship with a borderline, and I have achieved a state of recovery where I'm not angry, I'm not in pain, I don't think about it. You know, what happens when you've been with a borderline for any length of time is that your sense of self gets completely destroyed. Your value, your self-worth, your hope for the future. And that's because the the person who has borderline personality disorder, they have a very horrible mental illness. And that is what they live with, you know, because of what they went through as infants and or toddlers, you know, the abuse, neglect, you know, something really horrible happened, and that something inside that little baby broke, and so that identity is gone. They don't have an identity; it's gone, and they never had it, and so they're doing their best to get through life without that. So what they do, what their mental disease does, is it will make you feel consciously what they feel on an unconscious level all the time. And again, we're talking about untreated borderlines. There's been some borderlines who have come on to this channel who are in therapy, and they have a really wonderful way of revealing, you know, what goes on. And a lot of it is what I had expected, what I had you know, I was trying to guess what I thought was going on, and it turns out I was right some of the time. So I appreciate that. But the thing that I found most saddening and horrible about it is that they have no identity. They because they never were allowed to create one, and that's because they were given the very clear message that they are are not worthy of love, that they deserve to die, and that they don't exist. And so they're, anyway, so that feeling that they have within them all the time, which they're, you know, that's where the facades come from, that's where the impulsive behavior comes from, that's where the, you know, maybe the drug addiction or the sex addiction or, you know, whatever it is that they do to try and deal with that continuous horrific like feeling on the inside of them, they will give that to you. If you stay with them in a romantic relationship long enough, what ends up happening is that you start to take on those feelings as well. And I felt exactly like that when I was out. You know, by the time that my borderline ex was done with me, I had no self esteem. I didn't have any love for myself. I didn't think that I was worthy of love. And then it wasn't even on a conscious level. I just walked around with this feeling. I didn't know where I was going in life. I didn't know what I was doing. And that's not like me. I'm very ambitious. I know exactly what I want. And I just forgot, and nothing mattered anymore. And it was really horrible and lonely and painful. And I remember one day, you know, walking along the beach and just being so full of pain and misery, and not even fully conscious of how much pain I was in. And this beautiful, like, you know, unbelievably beautiful woman in a bikini walking by, and she smiled at me, hi. And it was so shocking to me that a woman would want to say hi to me. I mean, I just to have enough value for somebody to say hi to me and honestly wish me a good day and smile at me was the awareness of, oh my God, how bad am I that this is a huge deal? And then one of my neighbors invited me over and I got all teary-eyed. My God, you want me to come spend time with you? I'm worth, it was like, oh my God. And I found myself splitting in my mind. Like I would have these borderline splits with myself and with other people. And it was like, oh my God, she infected me. The end result was that when there was nothing left of me, that was when the final discard came. And as somebody has pointed out really eloquently, that borderlines internalize the parent. And if the parent has given them the message that you deserve to die, you have no value, you do not exist, then when you give them love, when you actually accomplish your Herculean task over however many months or years it takes for you to finally get to them and give them the love that they so desperately crave and need, when it takes hold, their only response is to destroy you. Because they can't, if they can't love themselves, they're not going to let you love them. That's what it's all about. The rejection is not a rejection of you. They are rejecting themselves. And if you've been in love relationships and you've actually had somebody really love you, and borderlines aren't the only ones who have never had love. There's no shortage of codependents who have never had love. They're on a different scale than the borderline, but they do something different. They chase after they chase after the abuse. Borderlines will do it too, but only if you're a narcissist. They'll only chase after a narcissist. And by narcissist, I mean like, NPD. So you understand that they are rejecting themselves. I can remember, being loved. There was a few, but there was one really big relationship where I had that, the whole fantasy, the real thing. And there came a point where, in order for me to allow her to love me, to really see me and love me, I had to get over a lot of fear, and I had to realize that I had to allow myself to rise to the level of how she saw me, because she saw me, at my potential, not where I thought I was or who I thought I was. She saw me for who I really was, which was more than what I felt about myself. And so I had to let go of the limited view of myself, and I had to die to that and allow myself to accept my higher, better self. If you've been through it, you know what I'm talking about. So that's what's happening when you are actually achieving your goal of giving the love to the borderline. You finally accomplished it. And they've love bombed you or something, and you've gone in there and you've loved them and they've received it, and you can see in their eyes and they feel it and you feel it, and it's real. It really is real. And then there's processes that happen in their unconscious where they can't accept it because they hate themselves and they do not, in their minds, deserve to be loved and deserve to live. So they will follow through with their original programming, which is to reject any real love. That's why they reject you, because you become the love they've always wanted but can never accept. So they reject you. That's horrible. Like I've said before, I don't know about narcissists. I think I could see them coming. I'm not attracted to them. They're not attracted to me. I can tell when somebody means it and when they don't. I can tell when somebody's planning to, I can feel it. But what's the most unbelievable genius of the disorder, the borderline disorder, is that it allows you, it gets you to the most vulnerable state you could possibly be. You really learn, because it's like, I was walking down the street just today or yesterday, and somebody's walking their little puppy, and puppies same way. The puppy comes up and just so happy and so sweet and just loved me. Didn't know me, just loved me, and I was I was playing with the little puppy, and I loved that puppy, and I instantly loved it, and I would have done anything for that little puppy because it's so pure and so sweet and so innocent, and just there's no guile there. And borderlines are the same way. When they're happy and when they're feeling safe and they're idealizing you, it's real. They really do, and it's an intense love. It's like a little puppy or a little baby. They love completely and intensely, but it's superficial. But what's so genius about it is that completely disarms me. All of my tough guy armor falls away when little puppies come up or little kittens come up or little babies or little kids come up and they're cute. I mean, you can't help but love them. You can't help it. They're so cute and so innocent and so pure. How could you not love them with all your heart? And that's the genius thing about it, because then when they flip on you, you don't see it coming. And it's the most devastating. It's the most devastating experience I've ever had. The most painful, devastating experience I've ever had. And that's why you go crazy. Again, if somebody's planning it out, I can see it coming. If they're not planning it, and then it happens, it's like, what how, what? It's just incredulous. It's unbelievable. So, you have every right to be full of rage, because how can you go through that experience and not come out the other side thinking they planned it? They planned it. They lured me in, and they were so good at manipulating me and seducing me and getting me to give up all of my self-defense. They were so good at it. And then when I was at my most vulnerable and loved them the most and felt safe, then they drove it in. Then they cheated on you. Then they lied to you. Then they split on you. Then they disappeared on you. Then they called you horrible names or all of the above. And it's just so devastatingly horrible. How could you not come to the conclusion that they're evil, horrible people that are the most insidiously destructive, horrible, evil geniuses that have ever lived? The reason why is because, number one, that's the only logical conclusion. Unless you accept that they have this mental illness called borderline personality disorder. And it is very confusing because the effects are identical to a narcissist, a sociopath. The effects are the same. So in terms of how you're being affected, you might as well have been targeted by an evil narcissist that has sought out your destruction. So it doesn't really matter. And so when I explain, what I believe is going on in the mind of the borderline, I'm not doing it to take away any of the pain or the guilt. In fact, in my experience, I think it's worse. I think it's worse. Because I don't think a narcissist is as brilliant, because they can't. When you're thinking to yourself, how can I screw that person over? You can't get as deeply into them. The person that's going to get really deep is the one who thinks they love you. And the one that you believe, when they do love you, you believe it. That's the one that's going to get in the deepest. So when their betrayal comes, it's worse, I think. I think it's worse than what a narcissist can do. That's, again, coming from somebody I have no experience with, getting I mean, of course, I've had run-ins with people with NPD and narcissists, but I think my brother might be. I'm not completely sure about that. In any case, if you hang on to that rage, you're doing so because it makes sense. It's logical. And that helps you get some sanity. It's an explanation that helps you to get your grip and then get your sense of self back. They did it. They did plan it out. Oh my God, I got sucked into it. That's why they deceived. It's not my fault. They deceived me and they pulled me into it. It's the first step. And there's one in one of my videos, I said something to that degree. I said that they plan it out. But that's where I was at. I was just coming out of it, and I was doing my best to try and get my sanity and my sense of self back. And that's, by blaming the other person, it gives you a sense of power and a sense of control. So by all means, if that's what you need to do in the beginning, do it. But if you want to truly heal, then you have to let go of the anger. I'm not saying go into denial. What helped me to let go of the anger is all the stuff that I've explained to you. Now that I've come to understand that, if they did it on purpose, then they're evil. Same thing. You got to stay the hell away from the evil person. You got to block them out of your life. They're dangerous. Get them the hell out. Go no contact. Have nothing to do with them. Right? But as I continued to look into borderline personality disorder, trying to understand it so that I could heal, then I started to see that there was a difference between borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. And that the narcissist does plan out your demise. They have no empathy. Because they're like a step further. They hate themselves so much. They believe that they are so unworthy of love and that they are such worthless pieces of crap that they think that they're not human. They think they're not real. They don't know that. That's their unconscious judgment of themselves. But they then project that on everybody else. So everybody else is just an object for their pleasure. And so they're going to get pleasure from you, power from you, they're going to steal from you, and they're going to do whatever it is they think that you want them to be or to do in order to get that. That is a conscious decision. Now they're broken. Once you realize that they're broken like a mad dog, like an animal that's like a rabid animal. Imagine your dog went rabid, right? Like Old Yeller. You wouldn't take it personally. The dog is sick. The dog is crazy. So an NPD is the same. They're crazy. It's nothing personal. They don't even see you. The borderline, they have a mental illness, and so effects-wise, it's the same. But as long as they don't have too much comorbidity going on, if they're just pure borderline, then it helped me to understand what was going on, because then I could heal, because it's just such a waste of energy to be angry over somebody who's mentally ill. It's just wasteful. It doesn't accomplish anything. It's very sad, and it's actually very painful when I allow myself to try and imagine what it must have been like and what my ex must have gone through. It makes me so sad, and it makes me really want to go and heal her if I could. Obviously, I can't, and I have no delusions about that. I'm not even going to try. There's nothing I can do. But if you continue to hold on to the rage, it's because you are in denial that they were incapable of loving you. And this goes back to your original wound with your mother and or your father. You're in denial. The rejection that you received, you're in denial that it had nothing to do with you. You think you did something. And that rage that you have towards your mother or your father is actually also rage towards yourself. because you think you did something wrong. When you realize you didn't do anything wrong, there was nothing wrong with you. You were a perfectly lovable little kid who just happened to have parents who were broken. And they weren't capable of loving you. They were capable of only projecting their own internal rage at themselves onto you. So if you're in denial about that, then you're going to be in denial about the borderline. You're going to think that the borderline did it to you on purpose. And what you really want, first and foremost, by staying angry and calling them evil and F them and they did this and they did it to me. I'm not a codependent. They're actually, it's so interesting. People throw around the word narcissism. But people really want to say that, yeah, well, my borderline was comorbid, was narcissist, which may or may not be true, but codependents just really want to throw that out there so that they can stay angry. Because if it was a narcissist, then they did it to you on purpose, which gives you the right to be angry. Your anger is denial. You're in denial that they couldn't help themselves. You secretly want them to wake up and take it back and apologize and love you, which means that if you want the borderline to do that, it means that you really want your mother or your father to do that. And there's a good chance that your mother and father were borderline or had borderline tendencies. Mine did. My dad was an alcoholic. My mother was a codependent with, some pretty crazy borderline tendencies. Flipped on me when I was 5 years old. Went from loving me one day to, pulling my pants down and, in front of the whole world and spanking me for no reason because I was laughing with other little kids and having a good time. So my mom had some pretty serious borderline tendencies. Looking back on it, I think my grandmother might have been borderline, but without a doubt, borderline tendencies, big time. So you probably came from that as well. And so you're trying to work it out. You're trying to fix it. But what you really want is you want your mom to love you. And if your mom was broken, she couldn't love you. That's the sad part. The part that you're missing, that's underneath all of the anger, all of the rage towards the borderline, underneath all of that is how tragic it is that you didn't get the love you deserved. It's really tragic. It's really sad. And if you can get past all of the anger and get to the sadness and mourn over that, and then do that, the inner child work, which really means, going and parenting yourself, because nobody's going to do it for you. Your parents didn't do it for you. There's nobody else that's going to do it for you. I actually wanted that. I'm looking back on it now. That was my fantasy. My fantasy when I met my borderline ex, because I was still in pain, I was still in mourning over the loss of my soulmate. I wanted to just crawl inside somebody and just have them, take care of me and hold me. That's what I was wanting. Now, tell me about the crazy irony of that I chose, an infant in an adult's body to do that. But what a perfect way to just feel the pain all the more. And I'm remembering, what my borderline ex said to me a couple of times. One was, after she had become aware that she, having feelings because she had been sexually abused. And I stood there with her and I said, don't dissociate, stay with the feelings. And she started to cry and I looked at her and I did all that and I said, you didn't deserve that, blah, blah, blah. And we're both crying and connecting. And she says, oh my God, nobody's ever this to me, blah, and I feel so wonderful and happy. And then she wiped her tears and said, okay, let's go to the store. I said, hey, hang on a second here. I need some love. I just poured all this love into you for however many hours it was. I'm exhausted. I'm burnt out. I'm drained. I need your help. She says, I'm not going to drop everything just for you. You can imagine how devastating that was. Well, that's because that's what my mom did. My mom said in whatever way she said, I'm not going to drop everything just for you, you tiny little 4-year-old. Just because you're sad, you little 4-year-old, I'm not going to drop my problems for you. I can remember my mom, one of my earliest memories, it's very vague and fuzzy, and maybe it's I don't remember, but I remember, my little 4-year-old eyes looking up over the top of her desk, and my mom sitting at a desk and just crying and weeping about what, I don't know. I think my dad was cheating on her. I don't know. And then me, wanting to comfort her, and her telling me to get away, leave me alone. And I was so hurt. That was one of my earliest memories of my mom. But so I repeated that. I'm not going to drop everything just for you. How? And then when I go into that, the way I heal myself is that I go back to that little 4-year-old who, his mother, not only won't let him in, but won't be there for him. And how sad and how lonely and how sad it is that, that little Mike deserved. He deserved a mother who would stop everything for her little boy. He deserved that. He deserved to be loved. He deserved to be told he was worthy of love. He deserved all of that. And so I go to myself, one of my therapists says, take a little Mike and put him on your chest, because that's what parents are supposed to do. So the borderline is the perfect playground for us to just reopen those old initial wounds. And then when they discard us, instead of going back and healing the wound, we hold on to the denial that we had as little kids, because little kids don't know. They don't understand things like mental illness. They don't get it. So the only conclusion they can come to is that they're not worthy. So you have to go back to that little 4-year-old or whatever and explain to them. Say, Mommy's really sick. Mommy doesn't have the ability. But I'll love you. I'll take care of you. And you give the love to yourself. Because that's what parents really are there to do. When parents love kids, what they're doing is that they are teaching kids to self-love. I hear the word self-soothing, self-love. They're teaching kids to love themselves, because after you grow up and you're not a little kid anymore and you're not able to go running to mommy to take care of you, you have to self-love. When something's happening, you have to go, yep, well, that just wasn't the right person, or that wasn't the right job, or that person's having a bad day. It's got nothing to do with you. I know who I am, right? I know who I am. I know my worth. People throw that around too, and they don't really mean it, but I know my worth. I know my value. So the bottom line is, if you're still angry and you're full of rage, you are setting yourself up to be taken down again by another borderline or a narcissist. There are people that have come on this channel, and I know that there's no shortage of them. There are serial borderline daters. There are people who date, one borderline after the other. Somebody on here said something about they like their borderlines. Now, I could just dive into that, but I'm not going to. But clearly there's some unresolved stuff there. One of the ways to keep things unresolved is to stay full of rage, to stay angry. And all I see is denial. So, sorry, borderlines, for the most part, pure borderlines don't mean to cause you any harm. They just want love. They're broken. They hate themselves on the deepest possible level. They have no identity. And when you finally get to the core of who they are, they must destroy you. They have to. And as long as you believe that they did it on purpose, you will stay in denial and you will attract another borderline. So if you want it to stop, you've got to be willing to heal yourself and see them for who they are. Then here's the other thing. Your illusion will die. Your fantasy of what you thought you had with them and what you thought you were giving to them will completely evaporate. That's why I don't remember my borderline ex. I remember my fiance who passed away. I remember my wife who had some borderline tendencies and did some things that weren't very great, but I remember her. I remember that other girl that I dated, and I've completely forgotten about the borderline. It's because when I looked at it and I healed that, you know, the mommy thing within me and the fiance who passed away, when I healed that and then saw her for what she was, and then I saw the whole relationship differently, and I realized in all those conversations where all the oxytocin was flowing in my brain and I was saying one thing and she was saying something else, and I was having this experience that we were on the same plane. As I'm looking back on it now, like replaying it, I'm realizing, oh my God, I was just totally lost in my own narcissistic projection. She and I were on two different wavelengths the whole time. When she said this and said that, she meant something completely different than what I meant. But I didn't see it that way. I chose to bring her into my fantasy. So you just had two people just playing with their own projections and transferences, and there wasn't anything really going on. That's why I don't have any mourning for what I've lost. Because there was nothing there. There wasn't anything real. Okay? I'm babbling. Maybe that's helpful. Bottom line is, if you're angry, you're in denial, and you've got a target. Your anger, your rage makes you a target for a borderline or a narcissist. And it'll keep happening until you heal that. All right. That's it. Talk to you later.